Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of What If. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I thought this was really fascinating because just from the little bit we've seen of from the trailer for What If, I wasn't sure what time frame, when exactly in the MCU's timeline is this whole zombie apocalypse thing gonna happen. I would have never guessed it'd be during Infinity War. I'm like, jeez, this is like the worst time, because you have Thanos coming, trying to collect all the Infinity Stones, plus on top of that you have a zombie apocalypse on Earth. Because what keyed that in is the moment, I was like, the Watcher talking about Banner coming to warn everybody, and he's like, where is everybody? And Earth's in the state that it is, but then two of the Black Order roll up, but then Wong, Doctor Strange, as well as Tony pop up. But yeah, that's the interesting thing too. It's I like what they did with zombieism in this, that it's kind of almost like iZombie rules, where it's yeah, you're a zombie, but you're still yourself to a certain extent. I'd say these are more like anime / iZombie zombies, because because you kind of maintain a lot of who you were, because I don't know if Walking Dead zombies or more traditional zombies would be able to do Tony's even the fact is that zombies are Doctor Strange zombie is using his magic along with Wong and everything. Luckily the cape came through and saved the day in the end, but still that's also brutal, the portal closing and chopping off Wong's head, but then all of a sudden all the flesh starts disappearing off of them. I was like, that's metal. And then I love Bruce freaking out. It's right, the wrong time. He's getting to that whole, oh, you need to come out now, buddy situation. I mean, obviously it happened in the original Infinity War as well, but obviously it's kind of oh, cool. You're alone in this situation and the Hulk's still not coming out. So that's interesting. But it turns out Hope's the one that saved him. And interestingly enough, it's fun. It's funny, what ends up transpiring, who ends up being at the centerfold of a lot of these. Episode 3's murder mystery, at the center of it was Hope. I mean, she was kind of a key factor in that, but it was more so obviously Hank being behind it. But in this one, it's because during the events of Ant-Man and the Wasp, they went in there to try and save her, but instead of her being okay, they never thought about what she might have contracted while she was in the quantum realm, and so that came back and it struck, and it led to this. So that's interesting to know, Hope is at the center of another, what if like that. So I thought that was so fascinating, but also I do because it's such an interesting trajectory that this season has kind of taken, where it's the first episode and episode 2 are kind of fun. There's a lot of fun to them. There's heart to them. But then episode 3 got a little depressing, but hopeful. Episode 4, just straight up depressing. Episode 5, fun and depressing, but also glimmers of hope as well. So I think that's interesting, because I like that. Also Peter's the one that rolled through. It's obviously Bruce getting a crash course on everything, and I like the very Zombieland perspective they kind of took on this episode, just getting Peter being your introduction to the zombie apocalypse and everything. And I love that shirt Happy has. I'm not single, I'm just saving myself for Thor. I love it, and I love finding out who are the people that survive, who's our squad. It's Peter, it's Happy, it's Kurt, which I was like, wait, what? Your boy David is doing his thing, Polka Dot Man and the Suicide Squad, and returning as Kurt under these circumstances. Then you have Okoye, Bucky, Sharon, all still being alive. So they basically end up finding out okay, but there is someone potentially out there with a cure. But the sad thing, and I feel so bad, it's but that means we have to go to Jersey. And I'm like, Jesus, why do people keep shitting on Jersey like that? But nevertheless, I love that Happy's just right, it's a freaking zombie apocalypse, and I'm still driving people around Okoye. It's I thought you were an Uber driver or something. It's no, I'm a personal chauffeur. There's a difference. Like I said, I do like that they do have fun with it. Happy's got the little Tony gauntlet, and just like some birds flew around, scared him. He's like, bam, 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 bam. And Sharon's like, were you saying bam the entire time? He's like, what? I was like, I love that he was kind of really getting into it. But sadly, Happy ended up getting bitten by Hawkeye. Like I said, that's just such an interesting thing. Of like, yeah, he's still the coordinated person that he is. Or maybe the argument could be made because he is a zombie. I don't know. Everyone seemed like they were still on top of their game to some extent. So, I think it's an interesting parallel to almost draw to, like, the small number of people that survived in this zombie apocalypse situation, plus, like, who survived this snap. Like, amongst the Avengers, it was kind of like the main six were the only ones that survived the snap, the universal, snap. So that's why I think it's such an interesting thing. Because there's also an interesting parallel to draw to, also with Infinity War, is that, some of these same characters survived the snap in Infinity War, while some of those characters who didn't survive are, like, amongst the survivors under this circumstance. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But regardless, poor Happy. And that was kind of like a really... She's like, sorry, Happy, turned the gauntlet back towards him and goes, bam. I'm like, oh, that was actually really sad. Okoye and Bucky going up against Sam, and that was actually kind of dark when she split him in half, and she's like, that was your friend, I'm sorry. He's like, honestly, I should be sad, but I'm not. I'm like, that's messed up, but it's also because you and Sam aren't the best buds that you are now at post Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Like, this is your experience, this is you after, like, Civil War, and you're just, like, annoyed with each other. We're, like, Steve's besties, and, like, we're just kind of annoyed with each other about it. Like, that's what their relationship is. It hasn't grown to what it eventually became through Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So that's, so that's why he's not too heartbroken about that, But learning that, Happy was going to, and, like, you see how much, like, that, like, hits Peter just for a second, but it's kind of like, right, we got to keep going. It's just like, man. And Hope doing her thing, like, that's also, like, just interesting to know, like, the Earth's mightiest heroes kind of fell pretty quickly, because once again, the freaking I didn't even think about it until just now. It's like, right, Hank ended up being the one that killed the Avengers in episode 3, and like, oh, once again, Linchpin had kind of helped jumpstart everything because he bit Cap and everyone, and that's kind of where that ultimately ended up starting, kind of in that regard. I mean, granted, a lot of the populace was already, like, turned at that point, but still, it was interesting. Yeah, MVP of it all, but then sadly ends up getting hurt in the process. Anyway, so now she's only got a limited amount of time before she turns, And it's like, despite everything, Peter's so hopeful, and she's like, how can you be so hopeful? He's like, he's lost a lot. His mom, his dad, Uncle Ben, even Tony, now Happy. But, his Aunt May says, well, used to say, basically you kind of have to, essentially you have to smile for those who aren't here to smile themselves. So he, and he's even like, you're Hope, your literally name is Hope, so, you got to be a little bit more hopeful. But, she wanted to keep that, like, that spark of hope is what's important, what's necessary for this. Cause on the train to, Bucky had to, and I love that line of, I think you've had enough, Steve. I'm like, yeah, I thought that was I thought that was kind of a really nice. I mean, it's also sad, like, he's the one that also killed Sharon, which I also love that line of, like, her growing inside of, like, Sharon and exploding. Which, once again, part of you goes like, is this supposed to be? Because people have referenced it being like, I think it was like episode 3, making, like, they were like, is this the what if people's, like, way of memeing the whole, like, Ant-Man going up Thanos' butt, expanding and killing Thanos? It's like, well, I mean, we've seen examples of that in this. I mean, when Hope grew and, like, expanded and it blew up, Sharon just like, oh my god, I got Sharon all over me. It's just, it's sad, but it's also like Steve's the one that turned her, and then Bucky grabbing his shield and splitting his buddy in half. It's just kind of like, oh. It's just kind of like, he is the soldier in this regard of, like, right, like, despite everything that's going on, got to keep trudging along, no matter who you got to have to cut through and step over in this regard. I mean, pretty much the last of humanity right here, I mean, because we don't know I think they talked about that being like they are kind of the last of humanity. Like, we have no idea, like, who. I mean, this is an Earth disease. They're still, like, fine in space. It hasn't transmitted to space yet, so they're fine in that regard. That's actually kind of interesting to think about, too, because, like, right, the Guardians are out there, so, like, Thor, like, all that stuff, like, typical Infinity War stuff has happened, so Thor is all getting, you know, Stormbreaker, you know, with, like, Groot and Rocket right now, so, but, like, the rest of, like, the non-Earth Infinity War stuff, is already happening, but it's also like, man, that it makes you wonder, like, how does that whole Titan situation plays out completely differently. I mean, because a lot of that does, because Stephen Strange isn't up in space with Tony and Peter, so how it makes you wonder, how does that Titan scene play out the way it, like, at all. I mean, because also, like, the Time Stone is still here on Earth. It never went to space. That's a whole conversation in itself. But nevertheless, like I said, I was going on a bit of a tangent. But they have to go to find out who's responsible for, like, this potential cure. So Hope grows and, like, gets them to the other side of things. It's just like, Peter, just smile, you know? And I'm like, oh, that's actually really heartbreaking. And ultimately, they, like, none of the zombies are climbing the fence nor going through it. And it's like, why is that? It turns out Vision's still alive. God, I love that Peter, like, scared Kurt. And it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I actually jump scared you. But it turns out, like, Vision's alive. And he's like, oh, I'm so happy. And it's like, whoa, they have no interest in him because he's not human. And the Mind Stone is keeping him at bay, which I'm immediately like, well, we know the Mind Stone is also connected to Wanda. So, like, so was she able to be? But we don't see her there. I'm like, you guys were together the last time we saw you guys. So I'm like, why? Where's that all of? And it turns out Scott's alive, but he's nothing but a head in a jar, which I will always, my head will immediately go, Futurama. Like, that will always be a Futurama thing in my head. But I do like that he's cracking jokes. He's like, really, are you in a position? He's like, yeah, but it's, you know, defense mechanism. He's like, yeah, considering the circumstances, I kind of have to crack jokes. And, like, you know, it's like, considering the circumstances and everything. But it actually kind of went super dark the moment it's like, you won't find what you're looking for, Mr. Barnes. I'm like, why is that so sinister? It's because, and it turns out T'Challa's still alive. He was being fed to a zombie, because I saw a zombie kind of wearing red. I was like, is that supposed to be Wanda? And then we saw a red glow. I'm like, oh, that's Wanda, which sucks, because Wanda is the powerful Avenger that she is. She's the Scarlet Witch. Granted, she hasn't gone through what she needs to go through in WandaVision to become the Scarlet Witch, but we're still talking about the person who can, amongst the Avengers that are here right now, is the strongest of them, and she still has access to our powers, which I'm like, man, that makes this zombie universe wild. Just like I said, just the notion of, like, yeah, a lot of them have got to keep their powers, but it turns out he could cure everyone else. He was able to cure Scott, but he can't cure Wanda because of the properties of her abilities and stuff like that. It rejects any, like, because it is kind of born from the Mind Stone as well, like, because of that, the cure doesn't work on her. So all he's been doing is feeding her, because he wants her to survive, because he also can't let her go either, which is actually really, and I think that had to be done on purpose too, because the whole entirety of WandaVision is her not being able to let go. And in this particular case, he's drawn so many people. It is an interesting thing to think about, because it's like, right, like, so many people were trapped in this, like, sitcom world that she had created, because she couldn't let go of Vision and what she had lost, and Vision couldn't let go of her, so he was luring people there to feed them, and even, like, T'Challa being one of them, you know? But yeah, it's like, once again, it's pretty hard. Like, how can any of you defeat her, have any hope of fighting her? It's like, none of you can go toe to toe with Wanda, you know? So Bucky, well, last time we see Bucky, he gets, like, thrown like there is no tomorrow. Poor Kurt, which he had brought up the whole Baba Yaga thing. I was like, that's so weird that you bring that up. It's like, oh, you were setting up for the payoff of Wanda being the Baba Yaga in this particular case. I was like, interesting. I wasn't it didn't cross my mind to think about, like, right, we do have a well-known Avenger that is a witch. Granted, she doesn't know she's a witch, but still. But at the end of the day, Vision wanted to make up for what he did, because it's like, right, I made a lot of mistakes, like, you know, because at the end of the day, it's like, right, you were willing to do all this. So many people, you died just for love, but it's like, right, you know, because I hurt so many people, so he's like, I can't leave her, but I also have to make up for my transgressions. So he rips out the Mind Stone himself, and he gives it to them. Because it's the means, if they could get to Wakanda, they can actually make a cure. Okoye not making out of this, which I didn't speak about, which it's interesting. Okoye would be in a zombie apocalypse situation, because if you're unaware, I'm sure you are, but, you know, to anyone that isn't, she's obviously, the character's played by Denai Guerrero, who plays Michonne in The Walking Dead. So, like, you know, or rather dead. She left the show like last season. So you know, so it's just an interesting parallel to kind of be back in that regard. But I also appreciate, you know, just like they're down to the last few people left, and really quickly, that there is an interesting element of there is some human left inside, maybe because of her circumstances or whatever it is, but Wanda comes over and is near Vision's body. The exact parallel to, like, her being beside his body when they get snapped in Infinity War. I'm like, eerily, it's just interesting, because I think just maybe because of her circumstances, she was able to hold on to her humanity a little bit more than most people, maybe. Which is kind of sad that, you know, once again, even on this other world, this other like world in the multiverse, their story still ends tragically like that. I think in the mainline MCU, there's going to be a little more hope to it. You know, I think things will hopefully work out in the end for them. But it's just sad to know, like, it, you know, their story is as tragic as it is, like, in this world as it is another, you know. But Bruce staying behind and just being like, all right, buddy, this be the best time, come on. And then, like, the Hulk comes out, so the Hulk can't be turned. So I like to believe he's still alive, like, fighting his way through. Granted, he was going toe to toe with occupying Wanda, so who knows how that's all gonna work out. So she probably ends up could kill him, but also, like, the Hulk is hard to kill. So I mean, granted, we've seen it's possible because of episode 3, but, like, still. So it is a thing of, like, Peter not be, you know, wanting to, he, you know, kept just losing friend after friend after friend under these circumstances. But, you know, it's like, right, he's like, Mr. Stark asked me to be an Avenger, and I turned him down, and he's like, well, look at this, it's like all that's left. But, you know, and I love that line, and it actually means so much hearing it from T'Challa. It's like, because, you know, it's hearing it from Chadwick, and it's like, that statement reigns so true, because it's so true for Wakanda, of, like, just because someone's gone doesn't mean, like, they're gone, like, they're always kind of with it. And then, like, it just, that, there's some, like, they didn't write that knowing things were going to play out the way it did with Chadwick, but it's like, it's just, it's eerie, and just how beautiful it is in its own right. Like I said, that line, because it is true to Wakanda, but also how beautiful that is for that to come from Chadwick, and, you know, that line resonating like that. I don't know, it just, it made me go like, oh, like, there was something to it. Like, I'm stammering, but you get what I'm trying to say, you know. But it's also like, right, you're not the only Avengers left, because it's like, yeah, you got me too. He's like, well, I'm not an official Avenger, but still. And so I was like, all right, I was like, but then, like, I was like, okay, this is hopeful, but I'm like, is Wakanda, are they going to go to Wakanda and it is going to be messed up, and it's like, oh, the lie that Yondu told in episode 2 kind of came to fruition in this world. And yeah, it turns out Thanos came to Earth, but he's infected, he's a zombie, but we do see he has, like the Infinity War story, he has most of the Infinity Stones, except for the one that they're bringing to him. So once again, the space stuff, because Thor's coming through with the because it makes you wonder how the snap would work with a zombie Thanos, because it is the interesting thing of, like, right, saving the world would also mean, like, potentially, because you also have to deal with him, but also, like, would it be like a mass cure-all type of situation of, like, would it have to be one at a time, or could you, like, Because, like, the whole point was, like, to be able to widespread the cure. So, like, if you did, you still have to deal with the threat of Thanos. But, like I said, there's still, like, so much space stuff. There's still Carol, but, like, it was the zombie apocalypse that happened instead of the snap. So, Fury might not have jumped on that beeper as quickly in this world. So, but Carol's still out there in space. Like I said, you have the Guardians, depending on how that whole, like, they might be dead because Thanos got, like, the upper hand and straight up murked them. And once again, it just depends on how everything kind of played out, because things were different. There was no Spidey, there was no Tony, there was no Doctor Strange to help out with the whole Titan thing. So it's just an interesting thing to think about, what stayed the same and what completely changed because of all of that. So just another, like I said, example of hopeful, but also a little depressing too. Kind of like, I'd be curious to see how, like once again, what other heroes, like I said, I'm sure every Earth-based hero has kind of been taken out the picture, except for the ones we see with T'Challa. I mean, Bruce might still be out and about. Bucky, I'd assume, got the moment he got thrown, he might just be straight up dead, or eventually got turned, but like I said, like, maybe Bruce is still going to be out there and fine. But like I said, there's still Carol, there's the Guardians, there's Thor. So it's definitely going to be interesting when they, like, come back to, like, oh, not just the events of Infinity War, but, like, oh, the literal zombie apocalypse as well. So just interesting developments. I'm really curious to see where the next episode takes us with everything. Like, once again, I'm going into the next episode having no idea. Usually I end up, like, finding out just because, like, podcasts I'm listening to end up, like, referencing, like, what the next episode would end up being. But more often than not, I'm going into these, like, having no idea what the next episode is. So I'll probably end up knowing before the next episode airs, like, what it is. But at the time of recording this, I don't know. And I'm not looking into it because I don't want to know. But, you know, I'll end up accidentally finding out anyway. But regardless, yeah, I'm excited to see what the next episode's about. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.